So this small project gets us familiar with connecting to a database using SQL update and select, and also the print R function, and also changing data from a database into an associative array. So nothing crazy here. We're simply going to build this simple function, which is going to show on the screen how many people have visited the page. And you can see from the database, we're going to build a very simple database first, which captures how many times someone has entered or viewed the page. So first of all, we need to build a connection to the database. So here we create 4 variables: server name, username, password, and database. So we'll be utilizing XAMPP. So we're utilizing our local machine, so localhost. Username is root, so the password for the database system is root, and there isn't a password by default. And then we're going to create a new database called user stats. So let's head over to XAMPP, make sure you've got it turned on. I'm going to go over to our database, so localhost / PHPMyAdmin. That's going to take you to the homepage for PHPMyAdmin. And from here, we're going to build a new database. We're going to call that user stats. And we want to store data so that when a user enters or accesses one of our pages, in this case, we're just building one page, that we want to store the fact that someone's visited the page. So all we need to do is create a simple table called views, just with one column. So this is just a simple example. And here we're just going to call this counter. So we're going to make a new table called views, and we've got a field here called counter. So this is just going to hold a number, an integer. We're just going to place a value length of 100. It's irrelevant. So every time a user enters the page, this counter will go up 1. So let's just press save and go back to browse. So now we have a table with just one field called count, and this is where the counter is going to be placed. So every time someone enters the page, this number is going to go up by 1. Apologies if I keep repeating myself, but hopefully you understand and can visualize that. So let's go back to the code. So once I've got my database details, I'm going to create the database connection, or set up the connection using, in this case, MySQL I connect. So that builds the connection. And now I'm just going to create this simple check here to make sure that the connection is working properly. So create a simple if statement. So if the connection isn't working, the system will stop. So no other code will get processed. The system will die. So die referring to that no other code will get read on the page. So the system will stop. So once that's done, we now have a SQL statement. So we create a variable here called SQL. So you can call this whatever you like. This is just a variable. And inside of this variable, we put a SQL statement. So here we're using an update. So this is an SQL command update. And we want to update the table views. So we select the table views, and then we set the field count to equal whatever's inside of the count plus 1 more. So every time someone enters this page, this piece of code here is going to run and add 1 more to the field that already exists. So the number already exists inside of the count field. So now we actually run the query. We need the connection and we need the SQL command. So that gets processed right there using MySQL query. So that now has been updated. So in order for us to see this visually, we're going to create a simple select statement. So again, I create a variable called SQL, or whatever you want to choose. And then I create a SQL statement, a select statement. So select count. So I'm going to select the count field from the table views. And then I'm basically going to return that data inside of this variable called result. So I'm going to collect. So I'm going to run the query. I need the connection and I need the query. And I'm going to return the results back into this variable here, results. Now I want to be able to manage this more effectively, this result that gets returned. So I use MySQL fetch associative array. So basically I take the results and I put it into an associative array, and that makes it easy for me to then select the data in a second. So then I'm just going to show you print R, which is going to be able to, if you use echo, so I'll start again, sorry. So if you want to look to see what's inside of an array, we can't use echo. We need to use print R. So that's going to show me what's inside of this variable, the data that gets returned from the database. So we can just see what it looks like visually. And then we're going to echo the string page count. So I've used these single quotes there, and then a space, and then dot. So I concatenate this string with this variable here. So I need the dot. So basically I just want to tell echo to print this and this. So concatenate, and then the variable row, which stores all the data from the database. And then I need to select the key that is holding the data for count. So we'll see what that means in a minute. So let me just save that. And let's go back into our, so we go to localhost / and then my page is called part1.php. And it says page count equals nothing. Okay. So why do you think that is? Well, if you look inside of the database, at the moment we've got count, but there's nothing inside. There's no value there for me to count +1. So I need to have a value here in order for it to count to the next number. So I can just go to insert, and I'm going to insert 0 so that it can take 0. Now it's holding 0, the database table field, holding 0. So now when I press refresh, the page count now goes to number 1. So here I've refreshed the database. We now have a simple counter. So every time I go to a database, I refresh this a few times. You can see it goes up every time someone visits the page, and that then updates the database. Okay, so you can see, if I zoom in a bit, you can see here that it says array, and then the key, and then the value. So going back to what I said here, and this print R, so this is printing out this associative array that I've created from the data returned from the database. And you can see that what's inside, or what's stored inside of this row, is an array that basically has a key of count and then the value of 8. And this value represents what's stored in the database at the moment. So basically, if I want this data, I need to reference this key to get to this data. So here I've used the key, and here it's replaced it with the data. So page count equals, and then the data number. Okay, so that's how that is working. So this is a very simple example of a page counter in PHP. Hello and welcome back to another PHP tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to build a simple PHP page counter. So as you move through PHP and become wiser at utilizing PHP, come back to this project and ask yourself, how can this be improved? What needs to be added? So could we capture more errors in this code? Could we, for example, how could we, for example, expand this to capture multiple pages? Okay, so hopefully I'll see you in the next tutorial.